You hand a newborn to a stranger for the first time. The baby is minutes old. It cannot focus on a toy. It cannot track a light, but it finds the stranger's eyes. It stares. Everyone in the room laughs and says the baby is already curious about the world, but the real answer is far stranger. That baby is not curious about the world. It is running a program older than curiosity itself, one written into its brain before it ever took a breath. Think about what a newborn actually can and cannot do. It cannot lift its own head. It cannot see anything more than about 8 to 12 inches away. Its eyes barely coordinate with each other. And yet, out of every blurry shape in a hospital room, it will lock onto a face faster than anything else. Not a bright light, not a moving hand, a face. Why would evolution spend its very limited early resources on that? Here is the strange part. Newborns are not just noticing faces, they are already choosing them. In 1961, a researcher named Robert Fantz ran an experiment that changed how scientists thought about infant minds. Before Fantz, most people believed a newborn's visual world was just noise, an unfocused blur with no preference for anything. Fantz built something simple. He placed infants on their backs and showed them two images at once, side by side, above their heads. One was a plain shape, or a bullseye pattern. The other was a simplified human face. Then he watched, through a small peephole, exactly where the baby's eyes landed and how long they stayed there. The babies looked at the face longer, every time. Fantz called this the preferential looking method, and it proved something nobody expected. A newborn brain is not a blank slate waiting to be filled in. It arrives already tuned to something specific, already asking a question before it can even speak one. But here is where it gets stranger still. This early pull toward faces is not the same as recognizing your mother, or falling in love with a caregiver, or feeling warmth. It looks like something closer to a reflex, a hardwired trigger. Decades after Fantz, two researchers named Mark Johnson and John Morton dug deeper into why this reflex exists at all. Their theory, developed in the early 1990s, split infant face recognition into two separate systems, and this is the part almost nobody knows. The first system, which they called CONSPEC, is not learned. It is present at birth. It responds to almost anything with the crude arrangement of a face, 3 dark blobs positioned like 2 eyes and a mouth, even printed on a plain card. A newborn will track that pattern across their field of vision more than a scrambled version of the same shapes. The baby is not recognizing a face as a face. It is recognizing a pattern, a kind of shortcut sketch, one that says, statistically, something alive is probably here. Only later, as the visual cortex matures over the following weeks, does a second system called CONLERN take over. This one does learn. This one starts building a real, detailed model of specific faces, starting with the ones the baby sees most. Which means the very first thing your brain ever prioritized, before language, before movement, before memory as you would recognize it now, was a crude geometric trick for detecting a living thing nearby. Not your mother, not comfort, just something with a face-like shape exists here, and that fact matters more than anything else in the room. Why would a species build a brain that starts with a shortcut instead of the real thing? Because for nearly the entire span of human history, a face meant survival information. And it needed to be processed instantly, long before an infant could actually understand who was standing over it. Consider the environment early humans evolved in. A newborn is by any measure helpless. It cannot flee. It cannot fight. It cannot feed itself. Its only strategy for survival is other people. Whether the shape leaning over its crib is safe or dangerous, familiar or foreign, calm or agitated, could not wait for weeks of learning. So evolution built a fast, cheap, low-resolution alarm system first. Detect the pattern, orient toward it, and let a slower, more accurate system fill in the details later. Speed over accuracy, at least at the start. There is another study that pushes this even further, and it is one of the strangest findings in all of developmental psychology. In 1977, researchers Andrew Meltzoff and Keith Moore published an experiment in the journal Science, showing that newborns, some less than an hour old, could imitate facial expressions. If an adult stuck out their tongue, a newborn would often stick out their own tongue in response. If the adult opened their mouth wide, the baby would attempt the same motion. Stop and consider what that requires. The baby has never seen its own face. It has no mirror, no way to know what its own mouth looks like from the outside. Yet somehow it can translate a visual pattern, another person's face, into a matching motor movement on a face it has never once observed. Meltzoff and Moore argued this points to something even more foundational than face preference. It suggests infants are born with a kind of built-in bridge between seeing and doing, a primitive form of connection to other humans that exists before thought, before self-awareness, before anything you would call a personality. Here is the twist most people never expect. This is not really about faces at all. It is about prediction. A face, to an infant brain, is the single richest source of prediction available in its environment. A face tells you, before words exist, whether you are about to be fed, picked up, soothed, or ignored. It previews what happens next. And a brain's most basic, most ancient job, more ancient than language, more ancient than reasoning, is prediction. Newborns are not staring at faces because faces are pretty. They are staring at faces because faces are the earliest form of information about the future they will ever have access to. And that hardwired hunger for facial information does not go away. It just changes shape. Think about how you scroll through a feed of images without reading a single caption, and your eyes still snap to any human face in the frame first. Think about how a single emoji, 2 dots, and a curve is enough to convey an entire emotional state instantly. The exact same crude 3-part pattern Mark Johnson described in Newborns. Think about how unsettling it feels when a face is slightly wrong. A mannequin, a poorly rendered animation, a filter that shifts someone's eyes by a few pixels. That discomfort is not random. It is the same ancient detection system, firing an alarm, sensing a face-shaped pattern that fails to deliver the prediction it is supposed to. You still run Fantz's experiment, silently, every single day. You still look longer at faces than at objects. You still orient toward eyes before anything else in a crowded room. You still, in some small buried way, expect every face you see to tell you what happens next. There is a reason this matters far beyond the nursery. This early, crude face detection system does not stay crude for long. It becomes the foundation for something you rely on constantly and never think about. Your ability to read a room in a fraction of a second. Consider what happens when you walk into a party where you know almost no one. You do not consciously scan and calculate. You do not think, that person's brow is lowered by 4 degrees. Therefore, they are irritated. Instead, in under 200 milliseconds, faster than you can form the thought, I wonder who's here, your brain has already sorted every face in the room into rough categories. Safe, unfamiliar, tense, warm. That speed is not something you learned in adulthood. It is the direct descendant of the same CONSPEC system Johnson and Morton described in one-day-old infants, refined over decades into something far more precise, but still running on the same ancient wiring, still prioritizing speed over full understanding. Researchers studying face perception later in life have found something else unsettling. The brain region most responsible for this rapid processing, an area in the temporal lobe sometimes called the fusiform face area, becomes so specialized that it starts seeing faces everywhere, whether they are actually there or not. This is why you notice a face in the front grille of a car, in 2 knots on a piece of wood, in the scattered pattern of an electrical outlet. Scientists call this pareidolia, and it is not a glitch. It is the cost of running a detection system tuned to fire early rather than fire accurately. Your ancestors who paused to double-check whether that shadow in the grass was actually a face survived more often than the ones who assumed it was nothing. A false alarm cost almost nothing. A misdetection could cost everything. This is also why the feeling of being watched, even in an empty room, can feel so physically real. Your visual system does not need a fully resolved face to trigger a response. It only needs the faint suggestion of 1, 2 points and a line, arranged in roughly the right proportions, somewhere at the edge of your vision. The alarm can fire before you consciously register what set it off. Now think about what this means for something you do every single day without noticing. Choosing which face to trust. Long before you can explain why, you form snap judgments about strangers based on features that have almost nothing to do with their actual character. A rounder face, larger eyes, a softer jaw. These register as safer, more approachable, even more trustworthy, regardless of who the person actually is. This is sometimes called the baby face bias, and it exists because those same features once belonged, quite literally, to babies. Infants with rounder faces and larger eyes relative to their skulls were, on average, easier for caregivers to feel protective toward. The preference for those proportions did not disappear when you grew up. It simply attached itself to any face carrying similar signals, adult or not. There is a strange kind of vulnerability hidden in all of this. If your very first instinct, the one wired in before memory even begins, is to trust the shape of a face over the substance of a person, then some of your most consequential decisions as an adult, who to hire, who to marry, who to believe, are being quietly influenced by a detection system built for an infant who could not yet tell the difference between a stranger and a threat. The system that once kept a helpless newborn oriented toward safety is the same system still nudging you, decades later, toward or away from people you have not even spoken to yet. And yet this is not something to fear, it is something to notice. Once you know the alarm exists, you can catch it firing. You can notice the split second where a face pulls your attention before your judgment has had any real chance to catch up. That gap between the ancient reflex and the conscious mind is one of the few places where you can actually watch your own evolutionary history in motion, happening in real time, every single day, in every room you walk into. You hand a newborn to a stranger for the first time. The baby cannot focus, cannot lift its head, cannot understand a single word being said around it. But it finds the stranger's eyes and stares, and the room laughs and calls it curiosity. It was never curiosity. It was the oldest prediction machine you own, switching on for the very first time. And decades later, every time your eyes snap toward a face in a crowded room before you even decide to look, that same machine is still running, still asking the only question it has ever known how to ask: what happens next?